It's really challenging for people on a personal level, particularly if they're not necessarily comfortable with talking about what they do publicly. They're used to just churning out their work and being great at what they do and being able to take them on a journey where you're reassuring them that they're not being a tosser, talking themselves up, that they can actually build their brand in a credible way that is going to support what they do but also bring them those wonderful personal development skills and opportunities that they would have never otherwise had access to.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how on where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You'll hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Hey freedom fighters. Do you feel safe and secure, or frustrated and fearful with your work or business? Are you indispensable? Are you the best person perceived as being able to bring it all together and make a difference? The person with a knack for finding a new answer, a new connection, or a new way of getting things done? And even if you are that person, do the right people know it and believe it? If not, then listen up, because today's special Bush bonus-ode will be mission critical to your future success in our rapidly changing world. You see, we now live in a time when being merely good, merely obedient and merely reliable is no longer good enough. In an increasingly time-poor world of infinite choice, where everything is perceived as being the same, people will choose the cheapest. This is a never-ending negative spiral on the road to ruin and oblivion. In our hyper-competitive world that's caught in this never-ending race to the bottom, everything is forced to turn us into replaceable cogs in a vast machine. And the easier you are to replace, the less you'll get paid. Until they don't need you anymore at all, because they can get you elsewhere cheaper and easier. If what you're doing can be optimised for productivity by being totally planned, controlled and measured within an inch of its life, then you're interchangeable and replaceable by the next best cheaper option. If you're known as one of many, you'll become a non-choice and your income and your working days are limited. You're likely living on death row with an unknown but approaching execution date without even knowing it. In this new world of work, we're left with only two survival-thrive choices. Win short-term with a stay of execution by being more ordinary, more standard and cheaper, or win by being faster, more remarkable and more connected. You may be able to survive for a while being the cheapest, but you earn your place in the world with humanity and leadership, because we all crave the unique, the remarkable, and that human connection. In this new world of work, you need to become known as the best person available that can solve someone's meaningful problem, a problem that you truly care about and can solve remarkably. As Seth Godin summed up so well in his book Linchpin, the future belongs to celebrity chefs, not to cooks or bottle washers. We need to be known as the constant creators of new solutions, not following someone else's recipe. To survive and thrive in our rapidly changing global future, you need to become an artist who creates gifts, connections and humanity, an indispensable linchpin and a troubleshooter who's seen as the best person to meet these needs and to solve meaningful problems. You see, all of us value insight, creativity, and engagement. If the right people recognise you as one of the best to deliver this, then your future is safe, secure, and potentially prosperous. So how do you protect yourself and achieve this? Well, you know what I'm about to say. You need to get invested, and you need to do it now. And the first and most important step is to build your personal brand. You need to become famous to the few that matter to your future. And the good news is that there's never been a better time or opportunity for you to make this happen. So take a quick minute now and Google yourself. Do you come up? If there are items that mention you, do they show what you want the world to see? And how do people perceive you offline? Do they connect you and your values with what you do and the value that you create? Now, for me, branding has become a somewhat overused term that means different things to different people and often leaves me feeling confused and not sure what to do about it. So what's your personal brand? Why should you care about it? And why does it matter? Where do you start and how do you build your personal brand? Well, this is where today's special guest Andrew Montesi comes in. You see, over the years I've learnt the hard way that it doesn't matter how good you are at what you do, if the right people don't know about it and they don't know, like and trust you, then you're always going to do it tough. And this is particularly relevant in today's world of constant noise where everyone with an iPhone is a budding journalist, a DJ, a photographer, a movie star, an influencer. And the old 15 minutes of fame has been reduced to about 15 seconds as it's drowned out in the absolute constant ad nauseum of noise. So a couple of years ago, we delved into the personal branding space and we had some involvement with a lot of so-called media expert propeller heads who promised the world but absolutely delivered pretty much zilch. Until we were lucky enough to meet today's guest, who's been absolutely instrumental in profiling and positioning me personally and our know-how business as thought leaders in the property finance industry nationally. And the benefits have been amazing and life-changing. Andrew Montesi calls himself a full-stack marketer, but I'd like to call him the all-things marketing orchestra leader. I just hum a few bars of a marketing message I'm thinking of, and he turns this into a full-blown symphony, assembles all the best available musicians and instruments, and makes sure they're performing our song in front of a large, interested crowd who wants to hear it. Andrew, or Monty as he's best known, answers all of your personal branding questions today. He opens your ears to the critical importance of your personal brand, and he motivates you on how to get started or to be doing it a lot more effectively. So welcome to this special Get Invested personal branding bonus-ode with Andrew Montesi. Freedom Fighters, it's Bushy Martin back again. And today we're talking to the man who's solely responsible for taking me from zero to hero in a very short space of time in relation to people knowing who I am, what I do and what we stand for. So great to have a chat, Andrew Montesi.
Great to be here, Bushy. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too, mate. You're the man who's been my shadow, really, for the last 18 months or so in relation to really just positioning us in relation to what we're doing both personally and as a business. So it's a really great opportunity to start shining the spotlight on you, mate. So I'm going to make you dance a bit today, buddy.
I'm looking forward to it. As we were saying off mic, mate, it's a little bit uncomfortable for me, actually, talking about myself and what I do rather than forcing people like yourself to talk about what you do.
Well, you're going to get a taste of your own medicine today, mate. So
sounds good.
Get ready for it. Now, mate, for those who don't know who you are and what you do, can you just give us a bit of a rundown so that people are clear on where you're at and where you're heading, please, buddy?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is a good one because my wife constantly asks me this question, what do you actually do? But, mate, very broadly, I describe myself as a full-stack marketer and media producer, which means I'm a jack of all trades, hopefully master of some. And I have my own marketing business, which is Apiro Consulting, and I've also spent the last few years working full-time in startups as well. So one that I'm with at the moment is Pickstar, which is a marketplace to book sports stars for commercial opportunities. So that involves me doing everything from the broader strategy for businesses and the personal brands within the business through to the nuts and bolts of setting up Facebook campaigns, doing podcasts, creating content, and everything in between. So hence the jack of all trades line.
Yeah, and the stack marketer, I like that too, mate. I'm envisaging pancakes, but I tell you what, it's a really broad area that you work in, and you use the word marketing and you use the word branding, and it sort of means different things to different people. What parts of that whole equation, there's a lot in it, don't you do rather than what you do, because that might just help the listeners understand where you fit into the equation, mate?
Good question. So there's a few things that I don't specifically do, and that is graphic design, video editing. But having said that, it's almost hard to explain, but I'm very experienced in those areas, but not in a hands-on way. So I'll work closely with designers, I'll work closely with video producers, I'll work closely with audio engineers, but it's more on a creative and strategic process and a system, more so than actually doing the nuts and bolts itself. But like my background is journalism, so I'll create content in terms of writing. I'll conduct interviews and produce the content, but not necessarily the nuts and bolts. But as far as what else I don't do, mate, like, to be honest, there's not much.
Yeah.
It's been one of those things where over the last 10 years, I've forced myself to learn things as I've needed to solve problems, both for myself, but also the businesses that I've worked within, to be able to tick boxes from a marketing perspective when we haven't necessarily had the budget to go and engage other experts. So that's basically how I started doing all these different things in marketing, brand and media.
Well, it's probably why you've been so good for us, because we're definitely on the small business side with a small team of sort of 9 of us. And how I often describe you to others when I'm singing your praises, mate, is to say that I see you as a marketing and branding orchestra leader, where you understand what song we're trying to sing. So I'll just hum you a few bars. You'll turn those few bars into a masterpiece, and then assemble all the right musicians and instruments to actually perform that in front of a massive crowd. That's sort of the way I try to liken it, because you have this uncanny ability to say, right, okay, I understand what you're trying to do. I'll get the best people around me to make sure that once we put it together, we've got a sensational result that's on message and hitting the right people with the right stuff at the right time. Would that be a fair summary, do you think? Yeah,
it's a nice way of putting it. There's definitely been a growing need. It's almost like marketing project management in the same way that you would approach a property development, in that you don't necessarily need all of the staff and the experts full time, but you need the ability to bring the right team in for the right job at the right time. And I guess working in this business so broadly has enabled me to build a really good network of awesome experts in their field, so that if it's a web development project, I can pull in the best developer at the best price, bring in a designer. I might do some of the copy as well as the strategy, and bring in the best people to do it. And that way that, people like yourself and other clients who I've built up some trust with back me in to manage the project, but know that I'm going to bring in the right people who I've worked with for 10, 15 years, who I know will get the job done at the best price effectively. And that's always the challenge, because when you're not in marketing, there's a million different web developers out there. There's 50 million graphic designers out there. Like where do you start?
Yeah.
And I think that's where I can offer that value.
Absolutely. And I'm just talking exactly around that. I often say, look, we've rubbed shoulders with 1,000 propeller heads in this space over the last 5 years, I reckon. And it wasn't until meeting you that we finally had a chance to work with someone who walks the talk and actually delivers what you say you're going to deliver, because there's lots of promise in this whole space around what people are going to do for you, and they'll charge big dollars for very little outcome. And it's been a pleasure to finally come across someone like yourself who really does understand it, who can position the message that is relevant to what we're trying to say, and really is getting the sort of engagement and connection with the right people. So we're becoming sort of famous to a few rather than famous to many. And I think that's been the real key for us. But if I dig into your why, mate, why do you do what you do?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, there's a number of things. So I'm a little bit addicted to seeing people and businesses grow in whatever way that they want to. So whether that's on a relational level or whether that's on a commercial level, like I get a real kick out of seeing people achieve those goals that they've set themselves. And I guess the other thing as part of that is I get energised by it, and I also get energised by the hard things. So, we'll probably talk about it a bit later, but like I've got a fair background in startups, and starting with not much from a marketing perspective. So I get a lot of satisfaction from starting with almost a bit of a clean slate, and even if there's not much of a budget, and creating something out of nothing. So that really motivates me. But then seeing how that affects people on a personal level, and how they grow and develop as people, like particularly in this marketing space, there's the commercial aspect, but it's really challenging for people on a personal level, particularly if they're not necessarily comfortable with talking about what they do publicly. They're used to just churning out their work and being great at what they do, and being able to take them on a journey where you're reassuring them that they're not being a tosser, talking themselves up, but they can actually build their brand in a credible way that is going to support what they do, but also bring them those wonderful personal development skills and opportunities that they would have never otherwise had access to. Yeah, so that's what I really love about it.
Yeah, it's a really good call. I haven't actually thought about that, but it's the person you become on the way to communicating a message that I think is something that none of us think enough about. And I can say firsthand for myself, with the opportunities that you've helped create for us in the media space and in a whole bunch of areas, what it forces you to do is really think hard about what you really do believe, and get really good at communicating that in a way that is both authentic but also people can relate and connect to. And it's not until you actually step up onto that plate that you challenge yourself really to start doing those things. And I think the really good news for me, talking personally with what you've helped us with, is I've become a much better person, both professionally and personally, as a result of being forced to get really clear around what I believe and how I communicate that. And that's a bit of an unsung part of the whole branding marketing exercise that doesn't get much focus.
Yeah, and I think, you're a great example of it, and same with a couple of others that I've worked with over the years who've just been really open, and that's the key, is starting out on this journey. You're not going to know what's ahead. It might be new territory that you're entering in, but going, all right, I'm just going to be open to it, and I might be challenged. I might be forced to do things that I'm not comfortable with initially, but I'm going to trust the experts that I'm working with, and I'm going to trust that I know what I'm talking about, and I'm going to actually trust myself in terms of as a subject matter expert. And that's the key. Like I've been very lucky that the people that I tend to work with walk the talk, and where I get concerned as a marketer is if someone is asking me to sell something that's not really them. So someone who wants to be perceived as an expert, but they don't back it up with a credible career, with the qualifications, with the expertise and the experience. But people like yourself, you've got the runs on the board, and that for me is the perfect foundation to then be open and actually look at launching and building a brand around it.
Well, you picked up on something really good there. Have you come across people who, after having a chat and getting to understand where they're at, they're going, there's not a fit here, what they're looking to promote themselves as and where they're at don't work? How have you manoeuvred around that, mate?
Yeah, it's challenging. I've had a few, but invariably it doesn't go anywhere. Even though they might have the intention of doing all these great things and building a brand, if it isn't solid, then they're going to find it very hard to give me the fundamentals that I need to be able to build their brand. So a lot of what I do, particularly in the thought leadership kind of expertise, is use content. So if I'm going to put you up, Bushy, to talk for an hour about what you do in property, well, you could keep talking and talking and talking and talking because you know it like the back of your hand. Yep. But if someone else who might have been part of one property development but doesn't really get it, they want to be perceived as an expert in that space, and I'm going to put them up for an hour interview on a podcast, well, they're going to get exposed, or they're going to be aware of the risk and they're not going to put themselves up for it. Yeah. So before you know it, they end up going, oh, maybe I shouldn't do this, or they literally get exposed, and that's the risk.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we'll come back to that, mate. But what I'm keen to do now, though, is get you to walk us through your journey so far. I know people keep hating hearing the word journey, but it is what it is, mate, as far as we all are on a journey. And I'd love you to sort of weave us through from as early as you like what you've done and why, and where you've invested your time, energy and skills, where that got you to, and what then motivated you, and what was the thinking on that progression to get you to where you are now.
Yeah, sure. So if I go back to my high school days, always into my sport, good at sport, had aspirations, I guess secondary to playing professional sport, I wanted to be in sport. So the goal was I'd love to be in sports journalism, like every.
And that was pretty early?
That was really early on. Yeah, that was in high school. But then, like a lot of people in year 12, I selected subjects poorly. So I did okay, but you know how it works with scores being bumped up, pulled down, you know, just choosing a really bad mix. And I did okay, but at the time, the tertiary entrance rank for journalism was just ridiculous. It was like 96 or 97, which...
Wow.
It's not even close to that now. But I couldn't get in. So what I thought was I'd study social sciences and then jump across to journalism afterwards. Anyway, I kind of bludged first year uni, social sciences. And then through a connection through my dad, I got word that the Crows were offering... The Adelaide Crows, the AFL club, were offering a traineeship.
Yep.
And I thought, I might give that a go for a year and see how we go. And it was part-time in media and part-time in junior development.
Okay.
So I ended up parking up the uni stuff and jumping across to the Crows, which was an amazing experience in some ways.
Yep.
And to be honest, bloody terrible in others. Like I was running these...
Yeah, I'm interested there. So what's the good and the bad and the ugly of that experience, mate? Tell us about it.
I have a few repressed memories, so this might be part of a healing process for me. But so the Crows, they still do it. They run these junior development programs where you go out to schools and every day and run sessions, and it's good content for the kids, and the kids love it. But ultimately, it's also about getting the Crows brand out there in the market.
Yeah.
But so what I used to have to do, so it was former Crow Shane Ellen. He's now a copper, but he'd host it at the schools, and I'd have to jump in the Crow suit, in the mascot suit, and do a little jig and a bit of a dance. And it's like, this is all right, I'll just tough it out. It's just the odd, every morning or whatever, and it's just an hour, I'll be fine. But then, mate, it was an absolute nightmare. Like, some of the bigger schools, there's 1,000 kids and we're doing 3 sessions and I'm waiting for my cue to come out and do my dance and I'm stuffed in a storeroom in a school and it's like 35 degrees. I'm sweating in this giant crow's head. It stinks. And literally, I remember one time I was lying on my back looking up at the giant beak around my head and I said to myself, is this what I have become? I am a mascot. So that was the nightmare, but what kept me interested was I was also doing a little bit in the media department. So I was working with Matty Robberin, another Crows legend who, like back in the day, it was a handful of staff and they just kind of got handed these departments and Matty Robberin's a great bloke and at the time he was looking after media and he knew I was interested, so he'd let me write for the website and things like that. And that was what was keeping me interested.
Yeah.
And then I got to a point, to cut a long story short, where the Crows brought on a former journo, a guy by the name of David Burtonshaw, who was at the Advertiser for 10 years. He spent another 5 years as the editor at the Kalgoorlie Miner in WA, very experienced journo.
Yeah.
And then he somehow talked the guys into letting me move into his department full-time as his assistant. And he effectively put me through a cadetship. So once he was awesome. Like he basically said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, I'd love to get into journalism. Like that's what I always ultimately wanted to do.
Yep.
So he said, all right, well, let's do it. And he'd trained up junior journos before. So for a year, like he just taught me how to write, taught me how to communicate. He taught me about digital. Like for a relatively senior guy, he saw Facebook coming before anyone else did. He saw all the other social platforms. He was really progressive with his web and tech.
Mm.
And so he's one guy I credit massively for putting me on the path that I ended up going down.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so he taught me that, mate. And then from there, I guess one of the big things about being at the Crows and those type of organisations is the networks. Yeah. So as much as I complain about the Crows suit, the calibre of people that I was dealing with was brilliant for a 19-year-old kid at the time.
I bet.
I had mates at kind of continuing to bludge at uni, and I was full-time connecting with pretty high-level people and learning from pretty amazing people.
I bet. Just jumping in there, mate, for those listeners that aren't Adelaide-centric or perhaps OS, the Adelaide Crows at the time that you're involved were the centre of the universe as far as Adelaide's concerned. Everyone worshipped the Adelaide Crows, the players. They were demigods in their own right. So all roads tended to lead back to the Crows. Sort of swimming in that environment would have been absolutely sensational from a whole bunch of perspectives, I would have thought.
Yeah, it was a wild ride for like my first full-time job. And yeah, so it was a pretty amazing experience, but the doors that opened up. So what happened from here? So I got basically trained up internally as a journo. And then from there I made relationships with other guys in media. So working in the media department at the Crows, I was dealing with the sports journos every day, helping coordinate interviews and press and PR, getting to know the guys really well. And then an opportunity came up at Channel 9 and the guy said, I wonder if you'd be a fit for that. And I was like, oh, geez, I'd love a crack. But, I didn't have a degree. It was very unconventional. But, again, to cut a long story short, I managed to somehow talk my way into Channel 9, and it was a first. I'm pretty sure even to this day I was probably the only sport reporter or journo that didn't have a journalism degree, but I'd received on-the-job training and through networks, and obviously I had to have the skills and the temperament to back it up, but I was lucky enough to be given a crack, which was at the time pretty high risk for the news director to put me on because it wasn't conventional at all. No, well,
I guess what I'm reading there, mate, and I think one of the take-homes here for those listening in is, sort of a sub-theme of what we're talking about, that today, and that is you can be really good at what you do, whether you've got the qualification or not, which you clearly were given the guidance that you had. But the added benefit there, I think, reading between the lines, is your relationship building skills, which is, if we're talking about marketing and branding, for me, it's always been about building relationship. And clearly, given who you are and where you were, yes, you've got some hands-on experience, but given your exposure to the right people, you've still got to have the relationship building skills to make that happen, mate. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, that's a huge factor. And to learn that at a really young age was key. As I said, full-time, 19, when most of my other mates at uni, kind of kicking around with a lot of others at their own level, to be able to go into an organisation like the Crows and see how the guys there, the senior managers through to the journos and everyone else involved in that organisation, see how they operate, understand that networks are absolutely key. Yeah. And, you know, we'll talk about this as well later, but those authentic relationships and not being the cheesy exchange of business cards and say, well, that's me networking, but actually building legitimate, true relationships and that kind of really underpinning things as a foundation for career development and career success was absolutely key. Yeah,
100% agree. Great. Now, so you jumped on board with Channel 9. Where did that lead to?
Yeah, so Channel 9 was an amazing experience. As I said, it was an interesting call by the news director, and there was a few people looking at me. I remember when I first walked in the newsroom, like, mate, you haven't done your time, you haven't earned this. But when I explained the crow suit story and my sufferings, then they realised actually he has done it pretty hard. He probably has earned it. But again, that was a very thinly resourced newsroom at the time, owned by Win, who was spending nothing, and we were the underdogs. And that was part of the reason why I got the opportunity as well. I think I was cheap labour, and that's cool. Like that, you got to take those opportunities when they come, and understand it's not all about money.
Yeah.
But I was thrown into it day one. I remember Tony Agars, the news director, said, yeah, mate, well, I know you're green, so we're going to put you through some training. Anyway, day one, they said, we're short-staffed, you're going to have to do this story down at Port Adelaide. Meanwhile, I've been working at the Crows for 4 years. The next day, I'm interviewing Port coach Mark Williams. I was like, this is just scary. But from that point on, it was pretty much on-the-job training again. And, there's that common thread that seems to come through with me, that I'm constantly training on the job and constantly thrown into stuff, and it becomes sink or swim. And luckily I managed to swim. Again, from a personal development level, working in media with brutal deadlines every night. You've got to deliver your yarn at the end of the night, and, still editing. Like, you might spend 3 hours out picking up interviews and footage, and the editor is still finishing off the tail end of your news story as they're putting it to air. That's when you learn to work under pressure. And
mate, that sort of ability to throw yourself in the deep end, is that something that has always been there? Is this something that if you go way back when you're knee high to grasshopper, were you always fairly adventurous in that regard, or it's just circumstantial and you've just gone, right, I'm just going to have a crack. I don't have a choice. I'm just going to give this a go.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of that comes from my dad, I think. So my dad's always been a small business owner, quite entrepreneurial, and always pushing me to have a crack, and that was his big thing. So, my sister and I, he made sure we were getting part-time jobs at 14, 15 on top of sport and school and things like that, because that really underpinned his life and what was really important in terms of hard work and really having a crack and putting your best foot forward and being resilient.
Yeah.
And not, like, that was a big thing for him. Like, he would never Dad never lets us fold and go, it's all a bit hard, Dad. Oh, geez, I just can't be bothered. Like that was, I learnt pretty quickly that was not acceptable in our house. And I think that meant that kind of really set me up for the next phase of life in terms of just being resilient and going, well, how can I actually solve this problem? And I know that even to this day, that's how Dad operates. So Dad still runs his own signage and visual communications company.
Yeah.
And he jokes, but I know that he's half serious. And he gets a client ask for something, and his first answer is, yeah, we can do it, even if he's not 100% sure, to be honest. And then he works it out and he solves a problem. So there's a little bit of that in me as well, I think.
Yeah, but there's no better way to learn, increase your skill, and challenge yourself than to tackle something that's just beyond your reach. It's if we're always sitting in the comfort zone, then there's no need to grow. So no, that's awesome, mate. So that would have been a baptism of fire. I can't even imagine how much pressure that would have been, just because the deadlines, and particularly these days, a lot of stories have to be produced really quick. It would have really sharpened the sword, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and it's even worse now. I've still got a lot of mates who are journos and reporters, and I used to have to worry about the 6 p.m. bulletin, and now, because of the consolidation of newsrooms and the fact that news is really cheap TV to produce, they're churning out, there's the breakfast shows, there's the 11 a.m. news, there's the 4 p.m. news, there's a 5 p.m. bulletin, there's a 6 p.m. bulletin. Some guys have 7 p.m. bulletins, and they're constantly on the road and producing and publishing content on the fly.
Wow.
Like, it's a crazy world.
It would be, because in the old days, the morning news wasn't much different to the evening news. They'd almost rerun the same stories, but 5 seconds is too long these days. Everything's got to be fresh and new with a different angle on it, so it must put enormous pressure on.
And the news cycle is so brutal. So because of social media, so they're churning out all this content, but then someone tweets some breaking news and they've got to go again and again and again. So you're talking about mainstream media trying to keep up with what's happening on social media. It becomes pretty insane, and I think it's pretty unsustainable, to be honest. And that's why we're seeing the quality of content diminish.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I agree with you, Matt. I agree. All right. Well, so Channel 9.
Then it was the law firm.
Yes. Now there's a massive jump. I'd love to drill into the insights as to the decision you made to go from Channel 9 to a law firm. Was it the perception of, oh my God, I need some peace and tranquility? How hard can a law firm be compared to what I've been doing, or was there a lot more to it than that?
No, I think there was more to it than that. I mean, I've always been passionate about business and looking at content from a more holistic perspective. Like, I love commercial content. I love content that delivers business outcomes. So I was always interested in that. And even when I was at Channel 9, I used to tinker and do a little bit of PR advisory and some. Like, I'm always tinkering and always learning. So I had that going while I was at 9. And then I was thinking about the next phase. I'd never, unlike a lot of journos, I never set out to be a newsreader, on the desk. I didn't have aspirations of, moving to one of the bigger stations or going to 9 at Sydney. So I was always interested in getting back into more of the business side. I just wasn't really sure. And then when this opportunity through a connection came up at this law firm, TGB here in Adelaide, biggest plaintiff law firm in SA, and the dance took about 9 months in terms of working out whether it was the right fit for me and whether I was the right fit for them. And it was a risk for both of us because law firms are quite conservative, and they're going, like, this guy's a sport reporter. Why would we bring a sport reporter here? And I'm going, I'm a sport reporter. Like, why would I go to a law firm?
Yeah.
And people also, they get in your ear, and there's this thing around ego with the jobs that I've had. I worked at the Crows, and people go, oh, even though you're in the Crow suit and you're over it and it's crappy, like, oh, but you're working at the Crows, so, like, you're living the dream. And then same thing at Channel 9. Oh, but you're a sport reporter and you're living the dream. And there were great aspects, but there was also a lot of limitations.
Yeah. So
I learnt pretty quickly to put the ego aside in terms of not putting my identity into those roles. So ultimately, mate, I just weighed it up, and I got to know some of the leaders at the law firm. I really liked them, and I started to talk about some of my thinking in terms of using content for brand and using content to create commercial outcomes. And we both started to get pretty excited about what we could do, and that's how I ended up at the law firm.
Yeah,
and I was really
I see yourself diving in deep to you've gone from one extreme to the other with law firms who there's still this perception of advertising as a dirty word. I still see it in lawyers now who are, it's all about reputation, and the guys who, the guys who prostitute themselves by advertising on the TV, and the whole element around that American side of the legal exercise is really poo-pooed by the fraternity here. Yeah. So it would have been quite challenging, I would imagine, in the start of that exercise.
Yeah, it was really challenging, but it was a great challenge. Like, as I said, I love that idea of starting from that point where it's almost a bit of a clean slate, and you've got to push against some old mindsets. Luckily, for the most part, the partnership was quite progressive, but what it took was for me to get runs on the board early.
Yeah.
So as we're in this stage of I've just started and we're feeling each other out, and there was an opportunity where so the firm was interested at the time in class action work.
Okay.
So, where there's a major issue and multiple people are affected, and there's a commercial loss for groups of people. It's a big market for some law firms if you can do it.
Yeah.
And in TGB's history, they'd missed out on that type of work, but there was this opportunity that came up, and it was breaking news, and all the partners gathered around and said, well, how do we get a piece of this? And I said, why don't you give me a crack? I'll do a press release. I'll create some content on the website and drive a bit of activity via social. Like, let's see how we go. And they said, yep, no problems. Anyway, that day we had a full press conference with every news outlet in the state at our office.
Wow.
It was on leading every news, and the phones were going nuts, like to the point where the firm just was not prepared to cope with it. And then it created this cycle of ongoing media, and it was great for the brand, and there were genuine leads coming in. And that's when straight away they're like, okay, I think we can work with this guy. And then to their credit, particularly Maury Bales, who's the managing partner, very progressive leader, he really backed me in and said, well, I think you've proven that you can do this stuff, so what else can we do? And that's really how the ball started rolling, and I was able to present ideas, and they were able to just go, well, okay, we'll give him a go, and then that would work, and then I was able to pitch a bigger project or something a bit more ambitious for the law firm, and bit by bit we were able to take on more as I built trust.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome, mate. Okay, so you were there for a stretch, and then was that prior to the move then into what you're doing now, or is there another couple of steps on the? Yeah,
so I was at the law firm for about 4 years, heading up their PR and marketing full time, and then at the same time, I managed to get involved in a youth mental health startup.
Okay.
So through a mutual friend, a guy came to me and said, look, I've just launched this app. It's basically a social network for young people to talk about their struggles. And he goes, it's blown up in a good way. He goes, I've just all of a sudden got 15,000 users, and I don't know how to handle it, and what do we do? And ended up being three of us as co-founders, and we went on this wild ride with Talk Life. I think it's now got well over 1 million downloads, this app.
Wow.
And is based out of the UK, and it's absolutely flying. But that was another wild ride that I juggled with the full-time role. So I would take, working nights and early mornings with the guys as this thing was just growing and growing and growing. And then, so growing that startup, learning about startups, while working full-time in the business. And for a while there, they were really complementary, because I was learning so much working in the startup that I was able to apply it with the law firm from a marketing perspective. And
yes,
it was really interesting, but it was like the startup was just nuts. Like, it was like, as I said off the top, I don't have a degree, but I would say to anyone, if you want to learn about business, get involved in an early stage startup, and you will learn so much in a short period of time. Like, I joke that, like, within the space of 12 months, I felt like I'd done 2 business degrees.
I bet. Like,
the learning was insane.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is really the case that, I think quite often the true disruptors aren't the ones who've gone down the traditional education course, because it tends to put your thinking in a box and you start to think like everyone else. Whereas if you've come into an area, whether it be a new business or a new industry or whatever it might be, and you're not tainted with that baggage, you're going to ask questions that the average person won't ask, and therefore potentially open up solutions and opportunities that would never have been thought of.
Yeah. Absolutely, mate. And particularly in the startup space so this would have been, not that long ago when this was 2013. But in Adelaide in particular, the startup ecosystem was very small, borderline non-existent. And Talk Life was an instant global startup. So no users in Adelaide, all of the users in the States and in Europe.
Wow.
And we needed capital. And I had no idea at the time about anything to do with raising investment, apart from seeing headlines about the crazy numbers that Silicon Valley startups were doing. And I remember talking to Jamie and Jacob, the guys I was working with. We need capital. What are we going to do? And then I saw an ad for Europe's biggest tech conference, Web Summit, in Dublin, and I read that there was heaps of investors there and you could pitch to investors. So we, with our own money, we go, well, let's go to Dublin. So we went to Dublin, and we're like 3 sales guys. And it's funny, actually, from a property perspective, the main founder of Talk Life is a former real estate agent. And we were just hustling investment, no clarity on the business model. I remember the first investor asked me for a pitch deck. I had no idea what a pitch deck was. So again, that was another piece of learning. Like, I've produced hundreds of pitch decks from that point. And understanding like how to market not only to consumers but to investors, and how to articulate your elevator pitch for a business, and to sell the offering not only to customers but to people who might want to buy into the business. It's a completely different skill set for me again.
Totally love it.
It's fascinating.
Awesome learnings, mate. Sensational learnings, and just as we're threading this through the collection of skills that you're putting together, and therefore I can see very clearly why you've now got this ability to take pretty much anything and go, okay, I know how we're going to solve that. It mightn't be all me, but I'll know who to introduce. I'll know what questions to ask, and I can see how we need to get them involved when to get the outcome. So that's a rare skill set in anyone's language, mate.
It's all about problem solving, though, isn't it? I mean, that's whether you're in marketing or other aspects of business or another career, life is about problem solving. And when you're in a startup and your startup has no funding, like, you have to solve those problems yourself.
Yeah.
So you find a way. You got to learn. It's wild, but it's the best career development experience you could ever do.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Mate, well, I reckon you've given us a pretty good picture as to where that's landed you with the PRO and what you continue to do with Pickstar and the sports influencer space. But I'm very keen now, for my own benefit and for the benefit of those listening in, just to drill into the importance of personal branding, because increasingly in this world of noise that we're all drowning in, it's really evident to me and a lot of others that just being good at what you do, it won't cut it. It never has really, but increasingly so. It's going to become important to be able to position yourselves with the right people at the right time, to be top of mind if you're going to be successful in whatever endeavour you're doing. So can we start to drill into personal branding? And let's start by defining what personal branding is, so that we're all on the same page with that, if you don't mind, please, mate.
Yeah, sure. I mean, very simply, your personal brand is what you are known for, sometimes for better or worse. But so the key elements of that personal brand, it can be a collection of things, including your purpose, values, your story, which is a massive one, skills, experiences, your credibility, and to some extent your network. And then you pull that together and that becomes what you're known for. And it should be authentically who you are, not what you do.
Yeah, let's link a couple of those, because you sort of emphasised story. Why do you think the story is so important to that?
Because that's how people engage, particularly on a personal level and even on a brand and commercial level. But people get caught up in the story. People can connect with you on a personal level depending on your story and how you articulate it. People buy into you. They want to invest in you, whether it's on a personal or financial level, if they connect with your story. And your story is often what builds your credibility and authority to kind of be who you are out there in a marketing sense or as a brand. It's the story is just, and I think again with my journo background and as a content creator, the story really underpins my work as a marketer. Otherwise, everyone can churn out academic content, but it's the story that really connects with people, and that's where true impact happens. And as you know, mate, like when you hear someone's story, it paints a picture in your mind, and it makes you feel emotion. And that's the big thing, is that everything these days in marketing is emotion driven.
Yeah.
So you look at social media, Facebook's algorithm is optimized based on emotion. So if you want to get cut through, you've got to make people happy, sad, angry, whatever. You have to make them feel something. The worst thing you can do is to not make them feel anything. And that's really influenced everything in marketing, and it's the story that can help you do that.
Yeah, gotcha. That makes complete sense. And I guess that links pretty strongly to that authenticity and the increasing vulnerability that we're seeing, I think, in people being much more prepared to express that emotion and not be a superhero 100% of the time. Is that a fair read?
Absolutely. As you say, authenticity is key. Like people, if you're putting out a story that is this perfect life and you've always got it right, people are going to call bullshit straight away. Well, we know that's not true. We know that this guy's full of it. And if you share your struggles and your challenges, that's where you build connection with people, because they go, you know what, Bushy was talking about his first marriage struggles. You know what, I've had relationship troubles as well. Like, I now feel that I can connect with Bushy and he's relatable. And it feels like a little thing, but that is a difference between someone choosing to work with you in your business versus a competitor.
Yeah, you're real. It makes you real. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, because I guess I'm attracted to the same thing. It's like, okay, well, this guy's had some challenges, and I can relate to that. So yeah, it's going to be worth having a chat to. Yeah, love that. So if we look at personal brand, because it's talked about a lot these days, who should care about it, mate?
Absolutely everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Well, because personal brand, like if I look at it from a business owner perspective, so people do business with people, not companies. So whenever I work with a business, I look at the people that are fronting the business, the founder, the director, the senior manager, because they're the one that will engage the customers. They're the ones that will build that connection. Yeah. People just want to do business with other people like them. They don't. It's like, even when I work in social media, it can be really hard to get traction with a brand profile on social media. But instead of using know-how, for example, as the brand and driving the Bushy Martin brand, well, it becomes something completely different.
Yeah.
The personal factor is so much more important. And then from a career progression perspective, so personal brand is the key driver of getting the promotion, showcasing to senior managers who are the ones employing for future bigger roles, that you have the capacity to take the next step. Personal brand is massive if you're looking to move on from the existing organisation that you're with and go to a new, bigger organisation with a bigger role.
Yeah.
And then, just as I said off the top, mate, when we were talking about it, there's the personal growth aspect as well.
Yeah.
So whether you're motivated by business or career or not, your personal brand determines your level of influence. It determines your sphere of influence. It becomes the building blocks of your personal network as well, and the favour and the opportunities that you get. And it can sound a bit tacky, but that's the reality. Like, if you've got a personal brand that really resonates with people, whether it's the guy down the road or your manager, you'll see more favour and opportunities in your life, and that's a fact.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think there's been a tipping point and it's not that long ago, really, where social media, etc., was sort of a peripheral exercise. But now I know that I do this. If I'm wanting to get a bit of a handle on someone that I'm reaching out to, I'll jump straight on their Facebook page. I'll read their LinkedIn profile. I'll have a look at their Instagram posts, and I'll get a sense of who they are before I've even decided whether I want to take it any further. So I think what I'm seeing, and you'll be all over this more than me, but I think more and more the consistency of what you're doing across all of those things is going to make a massive difference, because if you're not sort of coming across, in terms of a consistent perception across all of those things these days, people just aren't even going to reach out. Would I be right in saying that, mate, or not?
Absolutely. I think it's a fact of life now that if you're putting your hand up for a job, bank on the fact that your social media profiles are going to be stalked by the HR person, and your name is going to be Googled, and they're going to look at the search results, they're going to see what comes up, and if you've set up a silly blog or posted some crazy photos or whatever, they will come up, and that will influence, for better or worse, what happens with that job or whatever it is that you're aspiring to achieve. So it's a challenge, and it's challenges that are pretty unique to this generation, but it is what it is, and that's why it's so important to take ownership of it. And that's the thing. That's one of the big takeaways, is there's too many people out there that just don't take ownership of their personal brand, and you don't have to have a strategy around it, to really grow the personal brand, but at the very least, take control over it and manage it.
Yeah, I read a blog that you wrote some years ago where you sort of encouraging people to become their own media company, essentially, which I thought was a great way to sum it up, because once you start thinking like that, you're then consciously aware of everything you do, wherever you do it. How is this reinforcing what I want people to know about me, or conversely, how is it detracting from that? Because once you've implanted that seed of, okay, well, I really do need to think about what I'm saying and doing and whatnot here, because it could come back and bite me in the backside, you start to approach things differently. And I guess what I'm keen to drill into, mate, for those that are really lifting their head going, yeah, I hadn't thought about this, but I really need to be doing something about it. Where do they start, and what sort of things do they need to be thinking about to make a move in that direction?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's funny. I'm working with a few guys at the moment on their personal brands in particular, and we are starting from scratch. So it's been a really good process to work with them on. But for these guys, I've broken it up into really 3 big chunks. First one is preparation, then strategy, then execution.
Okay.
So preparation is the big piece, and this is where you want to get as much clarity on who you are now and where you want to get to, and be really honest with yourself. And you actually got to really ask yourself some hard questions. And that's the thing, even in my marketing travels, is people don't want to ask themselves those hard questions about who they are and really, and whether that is even close to lining up with where they want to get to.
Well,
so
how do you broach that? Because you're absolutely right. Everyone's pretty quick to point the finger at everyone else, and we can be critical of what everyone else is doing or not doing. But the mirror work can be pretty confronting, and I guess you become that mirror. How do you sort of comfortably get them through that process, particularly where there's a massive difference between what they think they are and what you're reading as how they're coming across?
Yeah, exactly. So first of all, asking them to articulate those key things around their purpose and vision and values and whether their behaviours line up with that. Most people, to be honest, when I start there, they don't have any clarity around that.
Yeah.
So that's the first point. So they don't have any clarity around that. And then the next step is, okay, well, what's the end goal? Which is, that could be way down the line. But that's the other thing that they don't have clarity on is, I'm thinking I might want to get here, but I'm not really sure. Particularly as a marketer, like, I really need to know where you want to get to. Otherwise, we could be wasting our time. I could be wasting my time. You could be wasting your time, and we could just be banging our heads against the wall.
Yeah.
So there's this whole preparation phase, and not only the purpose, vision, values, etc., but who do you really want to reach and influence? How others perceive you at the moment versus how you want to be perceived. Those key, unique things about what makes you stand out from the rest, what makes you unique, whether that's professionally or otherwise.
That's a hard thing for a lot of people to. I mean, if you're up to the eyeballs in an industry, along with a heap of others, that can be often quite a challenging thing to go, well, what really is different about me? Or conversely, you get this situation where someone says, I'm different because of this, this and this, but it just happens to be the same thing that everyone else says they're different about. How do you manoeuvre through that little exercise?
Yeah, and that's where there's a fair bit of coaching involved, and I used to go through that a lot with lawyers who would tend to say the same thing initially. It was like, well, no, let's dig a bit deeper. Every other lawyer's told me the exact same thing as you. Like, what is it about you? Like, let's talk about your experiences. What have you done or achieved that others may not have? And then as you coach them through this process, you start to move beyond the cliches and the bias.
Yeah.
Okay, well, now we've got something to work with here. And it's funny, I working with a chiropractor at the moment, and I sent him these set of questions to really kind of go away and dig deep on. And he thought, this looks pretty straightforward. And he ended up having to redo it 3 times, he said. Did it once, then just goes, no, this is crap. Wiped it, started again. He did that 3 times before he actually came to that point where he goes, all right, like, I feel like I've now been honest with myself and gone through this process, and now I have the foundations to then look to the next step, which is the strategy and execution.
Yeah, okay, yeah, perfect. So let's transition straight into that. So the strategy stage, what's involved in that piece, mate? Yeah,
so strategy is really how we kind of understand who we are and where we want to get to from a personal brand perspective, but how are we going to do that, and particularly in a sustainable and an authentic way. So the strategy has to be true to that brand and also your own skill set and experiences.
Yeah.
So the big thing I learned, again, particularly working with lawyers who are, they tend to be fascinating marketing case studies. But but the thing about them is, like, you learn pretty quickly where someone's strengths and weaknesses lie in a marketing perspective. So Bushy, you're a unique one. You're multi-talented in this perspective, but there are some people who aren't charismatic, aren't social at all, and for them to front up to an event and network, like, they might understand that they need to do it, but geez, they would rather die than do that. Like, that's the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
But that person might be an amazing writer. And I used to come across lawyers like this all the time who would have these different skill sets. So then in terms of a strategy, you build around the strengths of the person.
Gotcha.
So, for listeners out there who are thinking about this, well, if you think about the gamut of different things anyone can do to build their brand or to market themselves, start by playing to your strengths and what you're comfortable with. There are others who hate writing. Like I work with a lot of other people. It would take them half a day to write a 400-word blog, and I completely understand that. So you don't build a strategy around that. You find what their strengths are. And then the other aspect is getting the messaging right. So if you've done the right preparation in terms of your personal brand, you get the messaging right. So, and that's what you guys have done really well at Know How is getting those clear messages that you drive home, and that it's consistent across the board, whether you're talking on a podcast or talking on 60 Minutes or talking to someone at an event. You've got those key messages that align with your personal brand, and you're driving them home. And it's almost like, coming back to the startups, it's having that elevator pitch about who you are and what you can offer and what you do.
Yeah, I think what I think's been really a massive advantage to us is because, like everyone else, you tend to get very jargonistic about what you do, and we focus on what we do. But the average punter, one, doesn't need to know that jargon. Two, the detail that you go into makes absolutely no difference to them. And I think what's been really good with your input and guidance is that we're now communicating in a language and talking about stuff that the people we're trying to help really want to know about.
Yep.
So and that's the magic that I think you bring to the table in that regard, in getting that messaging right, because it's certainly a challenge for anyone who's been involved in anything for any length of time. You get very insular in that exercise and lifting the head and going, well, hold on. That might be important to me, but do the people I'm trying to help give a crap about that? Probably not.
Spot on, and that's one of the big learnings that I got early on, working under Dave Burtonshaw at the Crows, and then at Nine, was understanding what's newsworthy, and it becomes instinctive for me in the end to understand. Right, like, you might feel this is important, but does your audience feel that this is important? Where does it rank for them? Does it engage them in any way? Are they interested in this? Is this unique? Is it fascinating to them? If it's not, well, then you don't put it out there. That's the reality. Yeah. And it can be very hard for people to get out of that, because when you're in the industry or when you're in a business, it becomes all consuming and you can't see outside of your little bubble. But it's really important to look outside the bubble, and everything has to connect with your target audience. That's the ultimate.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we've hit the preparation, we've developed a strategy. Let's move into the execution side of the equation. What's that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, it probably plays into a little bit with what I said in strategy, but the sustainability is key. So you need to execute in a way that isn't going to blow your budget. I've worked with a client in the past who we did some really cool things with podcasting and content, and he got a little overexcited and said, I'm going to now employ a full-time video guy to follow me around, and we're just going to create some cool content. And then 6 months later, I think he'd spent 40 grand or something and got nothing from it. And he said, I probably jumped the gun there. So that's what we call building a brand in an unsustainable way. Like the content was great, and it did support his personal brand, but it blew the budget, and it didn't have the commercials to back it up. Yeah. So that's always the balance. And I don't care what anyone says, you can build a personal brand with zero budget. You can create a blog. You can. Everyone has the ability to build their personal brand. It's great if you've got the Gary Vaynerchuk kind of thing where you've got a whole team that follows you around everywhere, and you can just riff, and someone's going to just create content and publish 100 pieces a day. Right. We're all not there yet. No. But anyone can create a sustainable system that works for them to build their brand. And remember that building a brand is a long-term investment. I mean, we talk about investment on this podcast. You got to be thinking long-term with this. You can't be thinking, well, I'm going to build my brand today and tomorrow I'm going to get what I need from it. No, this will play out it should play out over your entire career. So that's the key.
Let's put some parameters around long-term, because I reckon it's really important for people to get the correct expectations around that, mate. Can you sort of put some flesh around the bones there?
Yeah, So the personal brand strategy will ultimately be determined by where you want to get to in terms of that preparation phase that I talked about. So if you've set that optimum goal of where you want it to get to, that will take a certain period of time, and that depending on what that is. That could be a couple of years, it could be 5 years, 10 years, whatever.
Yeah.
My view is that personal brand should be ongoing.
Yeah.
And it should, for at the very least, the entirety of your career, you should be conscious of it. It may look differently depending on what phase you're in terms of career and business, but it should always be a consideration.
Yeah.
And you should, at the very least, be controlling and managing it.
Yeah.
I always say with this stuff, you start small and as you build confidence in yourself and what you're doing. And one of the big things I've learned is to test. So again, the video example, if you decide today that you want to build your brand, don't go and commit to a video agency 40 grand tomorrow. What's the minimum viable product of what you want to achieve? Well, I might start by just doing some live videos, using my phone on Facebook, and I'm going to test what the reception is to that. And I'm going to get feedback from my mates on Facebook. And then if I feel comfortable with it, well, then I can look to scale it up. If it moves the needle, then I'll scale it up.
Yeah.
So starting small and building organically as you gain confidence. And then when you get to that point, video's dominating for me. Well, now I can potentially look to engage an agency to support me with that, to help me create higher quality content.
Yeah.
But it needs to be based on evidence.
Yeah. Yes. So it's not just a gut feel. It's like, okay, we're actually seeing some actual improvements here now. Let's build on that. Yeah, okay.
I guess that's one thing that I probably haven't mentioned is, in terms of evidence, is having those goals. So something that you can measure against. There's a lot of, again, working with a number of businesses over the years, a lot of people will operate purely on gut feel. Yeah, I think that worked. I think it didn't work. Like there's always a place for gut feel, but particularly when you're engaging in a strategy in terms of building a brand and spending marketing dollars, you need to have measurable metrics, whatever that might be, depending on your goals.
Yeah, 100%. I think that applies to everything, actually, but absolutely spot on there. All right, well, so let's talk about the how then, mate, and perhaps share with us some examples of some that you've worked with and where they started and where they ended up and what you assisted them to do that got such good results.
Yeah, sure. So there's some great case studies that I often use. One in particular, there's a lady, and I will name her, even if she doesn't want to be named. No, I'm sure it's fine. Jane Miller. So she's actually just finished up at TGB. She's a great lady, great lawyer, a family lawyer here in Adelaide. So when I was working full-time at the law firm, she'd just come back from maternity leave, and as is the case for a lot of professional women, coming back can be quite tough because that client flow might have dropped right down and you're really starting from scratch.
Yeah.
But she was really smart. She sat down with me and she said, look, I've got time. I want to build my brand and I want to take the time to build this practice while I've got the time. So how do we do it? So we put this plan in place to help her become perceived as one of the most respected and influential family lawyers in the community.
Okay.
As I said off the top, the great thing is that she has the skills and the work and the experience to back that up. So she was genuinely already one of the really good lawyers out there. And all we had to do was build a brand around that.
Right.
So to achieve this, building trust, credibility and authority is absolutely key. And that's really for any professional.
Yeah.
So how do you build that? Well, for me, it always comes back to content creation. If I'm a lawyer, there's really two ways to demonstrate that I know what I'm talking about, and that's for you to either engage me as a lawyer or for me to show you what I know by creating content. So the second part is what I can take care of. So we got her blogging around key topics and issues. We created a lot of blogs with Jane, huge amounts, and it built instant credibility for her in terms of if you don't know a lawyer and how do you know that lawyer knows what they're talking about? I don't know law. How would I know?
Exactly.
But if I go to Jane's profile and I see that she's written 30 blogs on the exact issue that I'm experiencing at the moment, instantly that connects with me and I go, okay, I think this woman knows what she's talking about.
Yeah.
And then the other benefit that had was obviously the search engine rankings. So she started getting leads from those blogs as
so
well.
So if you're searching for that subject and she keeps coming up, it's like, oh, okay.
But for me, that was the secondary benefit. Like, I was looking to build her brand, and that was really effective. And it's in the same way as what you've done, Bushy, with writing a book and the credibility that comes with producing that content. Like, you know, I see that book you've written, I know that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty instant. Even if I don't know much about property, I can look at that blog, I can look at that book, I can see what you've written, and instantly you're credible in my eyes.
Right.
I guess the second part to support that was media. So for most people, and it's a little bit sad, but even I do it. If I see someone regularly quoted in the media, in the mainstream media, instantly I'm starting to build this perception of them in my mind that, okay, they must be a bit of an expert. If it's good enough for 60 Minutes to go to Bushy Martin for a quote about this topic, well, geez, Bushy must know what he's talking about. If it's good enough for 60 Minutes, it's good enough for me. So we applied the same thing with Jane, and I was putting out press releases. I was pitching story ideas around Jane and her insights. Jane and I would, you know, every second day we'd sit in the office and we'd talk about news ideas. So we'd go, I'd say, what's happening in family law, Jane? Like, what's going to be interesting out there? And she goes, well, here's these 5 issues that I'm seeing a lot in family law. And I go, oh, right, 3 of these are actually really good story ideas. And then I would go package up those story ideas and pitch them to journos. And they'd go, great, this is awesome. And they'd go and interview Jane and quote Jane and put a picture up, and it would become a major story in the Advertiser or whatever it is. And then media fuels media. So then when there's a social or family issue occurring for whatever reason, journos go, well, who are we going to get to comment about it? Oh, I've seen that Jane lady quoted by other journos, so she must be the go-to. So all of a sudden, she became the go-to commentator, really, for family issues.
Got it.
So that was massive.
Yeah, awesome.
And then the final bit is the supporting material. So the really underrated thing when it comes to personal brand is having an excellent bio. Yeah. So in professional services, 80% of web traffic goes to biographies on websites. So people are, you know, whether it's accounting, finance, law, property, if they're referred to that firm, they will go, right, well, who are the key people here? They'll go and they'll dig around and they'll go, well, they'll check out Bushy's profile and they'll go, okay, yep, I'm confident that he has the qualifications and the experience to do what I need him to do. So that's a really important thing, and we worked pretty hard to build Jane's bio and to not only write kind of the overview of her career, but to include links to all the content she's written, to all of the media placements that she's appeared in, and really build that brand. So they were the key things there, mate, and it was huge. I mean, I remember hearing whispers in the industry that people were talking about Jane having an unfair advantage.
Wow.
Whatever that means. You know, it was huge, and the phones were going off the hook to the point where clients couldn't get in to see her for months. Wow, and she had to really start feeding her team and change her systems. And
brilliant.
The great thing about content is it's evergreen. So content that Jane had written 2 years prior was still generating leads.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was the exciting thing.
That's over what sort of period then, from the day you sat down with Jane until it was really ticking over? How long are we talking?
So we started to get traction with Jane really fast. So that would have been 2 to 3 months as we started to get a bit of media coverage. And it doesn't always happen with everyone like that. I mean, it was a bit of a sweet spot in that Jane had time, and also there was a real gap in the market. There was no one talking about these issues. Family law there was no commentary around it, but also it's very, very human interest related. So media were very open to talk about issues around family and divorce because it's affecting so many people, and you know, it impacts kids, and it's very emotive, which again is a major driver for media. So it really blew up, I guess, backed by media, and then all the supporting content that started to rank on Google pretty quickly. It became a bit of a beast, to be honest. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, that is awesome, mate. Yeah, it's a sensation. And I know myself that in brainstorming stuff with yourself when we released both books, actually, what you're really good at is is talking to me and saying, okay, well, I reckon this is the sort of stuff that people are going to want to listen to. Let's put together a bunch of headlines that are associated with that, and then let's put that out there, and then just see what bites.
Yep.
And that's just been sensational, mate, because, again, you've focused on what people want to hear, read, listen to, and then you can craft the stuff that you're good at around that, and then everyone wins.
Yeah, and I've only noticed the other day, I meant to tell you, it's the media has been really effective for you. Like I was researching something around a property topic for some content that I was going to do with you, and I was digging around some articles, and you were already quoted in those articles. So I was like, well, he's doing all right. I'm trying to research this topic, and I'm finding you commenting on that topic already. So that's how you know you're starting to get some cut through.
Awesome. Yeah, no, it's good. That's good to know, mate. Awesome. Any other examples of other people you've taken on a similar or other journey to go from where they are to where they want to be, mate?
Yeah, there's probably some shorter ones. I mean, working at Pickstar, working with athletes all the time is another set of really interesting case studies, because you've got guys that are almost handed an instant personal brand based on their on-field skills and attributes, but they actually need to build out the other aspects of their brand, and that's been really interesting. I mean, one guy who I've worked quite closely with, because he's a co-founder of Pickstar, but Matthew Pavlich, for guys that know their AFL legend, Freo's greatest player, South Australian, one of the best in the business.
Yeah.
But we've really admired what he's done with his brand over the years. One of the few athletes to focus on the broader aspects of his brand almost from the day he was drafted, in terms of being perceived as elite, as a leader, as an influential commentator, and family first.
Yeah.
And he lives and breathes that, not just kind of in the headlines, in the media, but he lives it. Yeah. And because of that, he's become a very sought-after corporate brand, and there's not many athletes that can do that, who can go and, he's got corporate partnerships with Woodside and, other kind of mining and investment companies. And
massive.
He managed to align himself in that corporate space, and it's very lucrative for an athlete, but not many can really pull it off, and he's done that so well. Yeah,
you're right, because, I mean, the superheroes for a very short space of time, the old 15 minutes has become 15 seconds. And to be able to sustain life after sport would be very challenging for those guys. And you're right, Matthew Pavlich has certainly maintained a really good profile in the right areas. And he is. You do think of him as family first and as a leader, and he just has that whole persona. Wherever you see him. So awesome work there, mate. All right, well, sort of bringing it to a head then, mate, if you were to summarise some of the key tips or lessons that the listeners might need to bring together to start building their own personal brand, what would you say?
Yeah. So coming back to those preparation points, so being very real about who you are and who you want to be.
Yeah.
And asking yourself those hard questions is key. And then walking the talk, understanding that to do this, it's a bit live by the sword, die by the sword type of thing. So if you're going to put yourself out there, understand that if it's surface level, you will be exposed, particularly if you're doing media stuff. You can get found out pretty quickly if you don't have the experience and the genuine skills to back it up. The other big thing, to be an influencer or thought leader, you just have to be creating content. It doesn't mean that you have to be writing blogs or doing a podcast. You need to find a way, whatever fits with your skill set and experience, to be creating content and publishing your insights.
Yeah, that one, let me jump straight in on that one, because what I've really enjoyed about working with you, mate, is that I can knock up a bunch of dot points that I think are sort of irrelevant to what we're talking about, and then you can turn that rough bit of dirt into a shining diamond in very quick time, and cut down what can be a phone book full of thoughts from me into a very succinct message that is really hitting the hot buttons for the people that are interested in that subject. That's a real skill. So I'd reinforce what you're saying there. You don't have to write War and Peace yourself. You just, if you're able to come up with the bullet points that you think are the key pieces, and then work with someone like yourself who can really turn that into some gold, then you can create some really engaging and enduring content as a result.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what I've seen with you and what I've seen with others that I've worked with is, the bit of dirt that you describe improves over time. It's like it's a bit of a coaching process as you learn from how I craft the content and the messaging and the angles that I take an interest in or that I see your notes that, that you provide to me become better and they have more clarity and you become more certain of your message and you're getting a better understanding through this process of your brand and what's really going to connect with your audience. And I see that all the time with my clients. Like it starts off hard for them, but as they go through this content creation process, it's a really refining process. And what I would encourage people is to not feel like they have to deliver the perfect piece of content from the outset, but to keep creating and to keep trying and to keep learning. And that's what I've always done. You got to test these things, and then as you go, you end up learning what people want, and you end up learning what really resonates both with your audience, but also you as your personal brand.
Yeah, spot on, mate. Yeah, brilliant. Yep. Sorry, mate, I interrupted. Go on.
No, I guess probably the final two things is getting really clear on that personal elevator pitch to be able to succinctly define your personal brand in that sentence or two, and then the second. The final thing is the fact that what you do has to be sustainable and you have to see it as an investment. You've got to commit to this stuff.
Yeah, and it does. It can be quite daunting for people who are absolutely flat out at work and then they've got family and other commitments after hours. Throwing this on top feels like a burden, but I can honestly say that if I compare where I was at and our business was at 5 years ago to where it is now, having spent the last couple of years spending a lot of time with you, refining and really creating the discipline to be sitting down on a regular basis and putting your thoughts out there, made a massive difference. So really worth doing, mate. Now, that's been awesome, mate. Well, I'd like everyone else, it wouldn't be the Get Invested podcast if I didn't put you through the ambush series. So I'm going to make you dance a bit on these, mate, and I just want to kick into what's your favourite quote and why?
Yeah, I had to think about this one, and because I'm not a big quotes guy for whatever reason, but there's one in my office that's stuck on my wall, and I keep going back to it, and I love it. It is, most careers turn into sales jobs when you get senior enough. And that's from Sam Altman at Y Combinator. So what he means by that is that sales is just kind of ultimately the lifeblood of every business. And I was the same. Like when it came to sales, I was like, I don't really want to do sales. Like it's a bit icky. But now, having been in business myself, sales is everything. Getting deals done is everything. Ultimately, that's what we want to do in business is get deals done. And this guy, so I don't know if you know much about Y Combinator, but they're the kind of the leading startup accelerator organisation in the world. So they scaled up Dropbox, Airbnb. Like they discovered Airbnb when they were, guys that were flogging off air mattresses in San Francisco.
Yeah.
So these guys know business, and most careers turn into sales jobs when you get senior enough is very true.
Yeah, I love it. It's so true, mate. What never ceases to amaze me, particularly in professional services, is you mention that word sales and people immediately start to put their finger down their throat or they back away. Yeah. And yet it is absolutely fundamental. And I keep saying to people, we're not in the finance business, we're in the relationship business. And don't kid yourself, that's not about sales. That's about helping someone to achieve a goal or satisfy a need that they don't know how to do themselves. It's about as simple as it gets.
Exactly.
So, but it's quite a mindset thing, mate, and it's so fundamental for those who recognise that. You can really see the difference it makes in their career and lifestyle generally. No, spot on. What on the reading side, mate? I'm an avid reader, but what's the top book that you'd recommend and why?
So there's probably a few that have been particularly influential for me over the last few years. Big one was Traction by Gabrielle Weinberg. So that really helped me formulate. I was talking about these testing marketing ideas, and instead of waxing 50 grand on an advertising campaign, well, how can you construct a scientific test with $200 to identify whether it's going to work or not first?
Yeah.
So I would recommend anyone that's interested in marketing or is going to be looking at spending some dollars on marketing, read Traction by Gabrielle Weinberg. The other one, I know one of your other guests mentioned At the End of Jobs by Taylor Pearson, talking about the future of work and how that's evolved to the entrepreneurial economy, which is a short but really good read.
Yeah.
And then the final one for me is a little bit different, but Ecclesia by Ed Silvoso, which talks about the real purpose of the church to transform the community, going back to how the church was supposed to be.
Yeah, I love it.
Which is a pretty fascinating read.
Yeah, because there's a real spiritual hole there, I think, in the current community generally, which sort of rolls into morals and behaviours and the way we treat each other. So, I haven't heard of that one, mate. I'll make sure I grab a copy.
Yep,
mate, now,
absolutely.
this one's a bit left field, buddy, but it's a question that everyone asks me, particularly given that we're involved in the investment space. But what's the top thing that you've legally done to minimise how much tax you pay, Monty?
Yes. Now, my big weak spot is accounting and numbers and that sort of stuff. So one thing I have learned is to get good advisors around me, Bushy, and I know you're big on that.
Yeah.
But I got some good advice about setting up a trust and getting a good structure in place. So that's the big thing for me is getting that advice about what structure is going to be optimal for me with where I'm at, and that, of course, has tax benefits.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's a cracker. Now, this one doesn't just apply to investing in property shares or the material stuff. It can be business or personal or what have you. But what's both the worst and the best piece of investment advice that you've received to date?
Now, it's interesting because I'm kind of walking through this now, Bushy. As I said, hasn't been natural for me, but the thing that I've been learning in the last 6 months is about untethering myself from the world's kind of debt-based system, if you know what I mean, where everything is debt-driven and it's become habitual for most people. So it's not really in terms of best piece of advice, not a succinct kind of one-liner, but it shows what I'm thinking there in terms of reading some content and getting some advice around how to untether myself from that debt way of living and bringing in giving as a part of that and how, like, the principles of giving, how they actually can unlock things for you in almost like a supernatural way. So that's a whole nother big beast.
Yeah, I love that though.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating journey, and I guess in line with that, the worst advice that I've got over the journey is taking on debt in the name of tax reasons. Yeah. Like, if you do this, then, you can kind of get it back on tax. But most of the time that doesn't work. Well,
if you're spending $1 to get 30 cents back, it's not making a whole lot of sense, is it really?
Spot on, mate.
My accountant's always said to me, mate, if you just want to get a bigger tax return, I'll just charge you more. No problems there.
Very good. Very good.
Now, awesome. Now, let's get back to the personal stuff. And you've sort of really lightly touched on a couple of these things, but a personal habit that you believe contributes to your success so far?
Probably the big thing is at least trying to be teachable and, where possible, parking up my ego and listening and learning. And what I have learned is that not everyone's like that. And constantly being teachable, particularly from guys who have credibility in whatever space it is. So even just the great thing about helping you create content, Bushy, is I get to learn from what you know about investment and property, which I had no idea about, like reading your book and things like that. It's been amazing. But then it's kind of being teachable just around the circles that you move in your networks. And that's the advantage of having great networks, is you should be positioned around people who can teach you things, and making sure that you're able to listen.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other thing that I've always tried to do is be consistent, and in whatever aspect of life. Be consistent, be level, be reliable, commit to things, and do them properly.
Yeah, I love that, mate. You're absolutely right. That the consistency. I'd wax lyrical about the need for resilience and patience and persistence as the muscles that sort of been withering in the last generation because of our instant iPhone everything world. But time and time again, success I see in any endeavour always takes 15 to 20 years. So unless you've able to be consistent and just keep plugging away, knowing that it's going to get you to where you need to, then a lot of people fall short. So awesome, mate. Last question then, and it's one I always ask. If let's take your own kids as an example. If you were to sit down with them when they're leaving school, a bit like your good old man did for yourself, what will you advise them to invest their time, energy and skills in to create their version of freedom?
I think I would push them towards getting experience. So it's really broad, I know, but experience in wherever they broadly want to go. So again, that's one thing that I learned from my journey, is that if I didn't get experience early on, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
And experience, you know, as a youngster, getting experience informs them pretty quickly whether it's something they want to do or not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You can learn pretty quickly. So it's not just like gap years and all that sort of stuff are great, and I'd have no problem with my kids doing that after school or going straight to uni. Like that's great as well. But if they're doing that, I think I would be encouraging them to get some solid life experience in whatever field they may be interested in.
Yeah. Try a lot of things and then really decide whether that is what you want to do, and that'll help you decide in any case. Yeah, I love it.
Absolutely.
Awesome, mate. Look, always love having a chat, mate. It's good to put this down on tape so everyone else can join in the conversation.
Love it.
What's next new and exciting for you, mate?
Oh, there's lots happening at the moment, mate. There's so I'm taking the handbrake off my Apiro business, which has been pretty manageable and a little bit limited over the last few years as I've focused on the startup. So I'm really looking forward to taking the handbrake off of that and growing both professionally and personally. It's really funny doing these chats, Bushy, and I'm not normally the one on the other side of the mic talking, but the things I advise my clients about, I haven't done for myself. So I'm talking about...
That's pretty normal, mate. An accountant doesn't do his own tax return. An architect never finishes his own house. That's pretty much part of the course, mate.
Yeah. So I'm actually looking forward to being my own case study, to be honest. And applying some of these things that I teach others on myself, and looking forward to seeing what comes of it.
I'm sure that's going to go well, mate, because the grounding that you've had with everything you've shared with us today would suggest to me that you've had your hands dirty with it. You just haven't, and you've done it directly for other people. So you have done it, but you just haven't done it for yours truly. So
absolutely,
that's going to be fun and games, mate. I know there'll be listeners here who go, this is really resounded with me. I really do need to start doing something around my personal brand. How can they contact you, mate, if they're interested in having that chat?
Yeah, sure. So the website is apiroconsulting.com, A-P-I-R-O consulting.com. LinkedIn, I'm pretty active on. I quite like LinkedIn. I never used to like it when I first signed up, but there's some good content and some good connections on there. So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn if you want to look me up. It's Montesi with one S. They're probably the best best 2 points to get me, mate.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. Look, thanks again, buddy. We'll have you back again to delve into other subjects around this, because it's fair to say that we're living in a world where increasingly, given there is that absolutely constant volume of noise pollution, if we are going to rise to the top, we really do need to be smart about how we're positioning ourselves and how we're making that happen. And your skill set will increasingly become in much higher demand as a result of that, mate. So appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me, mate. Really enjoyed it.
Good on you, buddy. Thanks, mate. Talk soon.
Cheers.
Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's HELLO@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/get-invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you'll live forever and live as if you'll die tomorrow.